Hello, I'm Scott Wright, the clarinet professor at the University of Kentucky, and we're going to talk a little bit about the All-State audition excerpts for 2015. And we're going to start with the lyrical excerpt right now, and that's taken from the Rose 32 studies. It's number 31, one of my favorites, actually. Before we begin to address specific issues in this study, I'd like to talk about pre-study exercises that you should start working on right now. First of all, you'll notice the key of the piece is D flat, and so 5 flats, not something that we encounter every day in our band music. So a couple things that the students should begin working on right away. First of all, the simple D flat scale, and I want to make sure that I'm playing with a terrific hand position. I want to make sure that I'm playing with a beautiful sound from low to high and then back down to the low. So I take very simple quarter notes. And I do want to make sure that, at least on this scale, I'm playing the side key G flat, or F sharp if you want to think about that. Then I try to make it sound that beautiful and feel that easy in the hands, double time. And then I double time. And then I double time. Okay, so that you really want to have fluent control of the scale in which the excerpt is written. Next, we take another simple pattern, arpeggiated pattern. And we do the same sort of thing. But we want to gain a real fluency with this key before we try to tackle any of the specific passage work. Next thing, I want to try to go through and analyze where the tricky spots are. And I'm looking at a couple different measures. I'm looking at measure 6 with the triplets, and I want to go through and I want to finger this slowly. And I want to make sure again for the G flat in the clarion register, I'm going to use the fork fingering or sliver key, some of you might call it like that. And then you get your choice, regular D flat, which I would probably recommend, or a side key, thumb and 2 side keys for the high D flat. If you use that one, it's actually a fine fingering, but you have to sort of baby that upper note a little bit just to make it in tune. And so you try to come up with every different incarnation of pattern you can. So on and so forth, so that your fingers become really fluent on that, so that you're able to really shape and massage the line in the context of the exercise. Another one, measure 9. You've got an ascending arpeggio, and then you've got a fully diminished chord. Same sort of thing. I'm probably going to use the high D flat, the regular fingering, because I'm going to want to land on that with a little bit more volume this time. And the side key is a little flat probably. And I'm going to work that diminished chord with different articulations. Different rhythms, so on and so forth, so that ultimately it's a very fluent flourish, if you will. So that you can really have your way with that pattern in the context of the performance. The next problem, I think, is a syncopation in the next measure. A lot of youngsters will want to rush this or miscount it. So you're going to set the metronome to the 8th note and be very deliberate. you make sure you're really feeling and understanding that pattern. And then, of course, everybody's favorite, measure 12. A couple things to consider in this measure. First of all, again, it's a scale. So if you practice your scale diligently, up and down, that's basically measure 12 with a couple alterations and a couple changes of direction. But that's pretty simple to figure out. The one problem is where we find the last beat of the measure, the note previous, the E flat going to the D flat. You're going to have to do a slide from E flat to D flat. So I'm fingering the E flat on the right hand side, and then I'm going to slide to the D flat or C sharp, because unless you have this extra key on your clarinet, there's no other way to manage this. So this can be kind of tricky. You can hear that sort of clunk, so you just have to kind of get on the edge of the key and sort of massage your finger down. And work that a lot of repetitions so you start to feel comfortable. The same thing happens, but at a slower tempo up in measure 3, the exact same slide. When I was a kid, when I was in junior high, I used to take lessons from an old big band player, and when I encountered this slide for the first time, he said, "Well, you just take your little baby finger here and you rub it up on your scalp, and you get some of that old scalp oil on it, and that kind of makes that slide a little easier." And at the time, as a 12, 13-year-old kid, I was kind of, ugh. But now I think he's actually he's on to something. May he rest in peace. You know, it really slides quite well. But anyway, you can figure that out yourself. All right, and then there are two last things: the turns in measure 11 and measure 13. You see the little squiggle, the sideways S. That's a turn, and the way we figure that out is we play the note. The turn is written actually in between, but we're going to play the note in measure 11, the D flat. Then we play the next note up in the key. We come back to that note, D flat. We play the next note down in the key. We come back to the D flat, and then you move on. And this is just an ornament, a little fancier than a trill, and it gives just a little bit of flair. It makes that line a little less boring. Without that turn, we have just kind of very plain as we move up the arpeggio. With that turn, it provides an opportunity for the performer to throw in a little dynamic and rhythmic interest, and also build a little intensity going into that D flat, which is a peak moment in the entire etude. Same thing in measure 13. We have a turn on the A flat. We're going to play A flat. The note above is B flat, back to A flat. We move down a note, and then we come back. So it provides a little bit of a nice closure in that case. Okay, so we're ready to start practicing the piece. A couple little things. You want to be aware in the key of D flat of your pinkies. The pinkies, if you're not careful, as we operate D flat key and E flat key and so on and so forth, they're going to provide a lot of clunks. For instance, the very first measure, going from the F natural to the D flat, if you're not careful, you get this big thunk, which is a real disturbance to the texture. So I'm going to start the whole piece with my right hand D flat key down. And it eliminates one of those immediate blemishes in the line. And those pinky keys are involved in the entire excerpt, so you want to constantly be thinking ahead and trying to engage these keys before you actually need them. Okay? Okay, so now for the piece. I think it's marked at 60 or something like that. I think, yeah, I probably, as I get older, I like these slow ones even slower. When you begin to practice, set the metronome to the 8th note. Okay, set the metronome to the 8th note. That way you're going to be absolutely accurate with your rhythm. There's the 8th note. And now I'm going to begin. And you start seeing how expressive you can be with your dynamics, with your weight of notes, stressing the important notes, but still staying within the confines, within the parameters of this steady 8th note subdivision. So that's how I'm going to practice. I'm going to be really precise and very accurately mathematically concerned. Now, I always tell my students here at UK, practice for mathematical machine-like precision, but that's not necessarily how we perform, because we don't want to sound like machines when we perform, because machines lack humanity. So you're going to now go back and figure out where there might be these little spots that you want to surge ahead a little bit, where you might want to pull back with ritardando, a stretching with the word rubato or allegando, to make the whole piece just a little sweeter and a little bit more humane. And I'm looking, first of all, measure 4 going into 5. I'm going to probably surge a little bit. So I pushed ahead. There was a moment of urgency in 5, moment of urgency through the triplets in 6, and then it pulled back with a little bit of a tenuto on top of the D flat, and it just gave it a little bit more lyrical quality. Measure 7, I'm going to linger on the top G flat. And that little exchange, that strange little harmonic twist there at the end of the measure in 7. I'm going to linger on that and just shape it a little bit as well. As I move over the top of the phrases in measure 8 and 9, and certainly 9 at the top of that diminished chord, I'm gonna surge a little. I'm gonna get a little bit more aggressive, both with the rhythm and possibly with the tempo, starting at measure 8. And then you heard it, measure 10, I pulled it back down. Okay, measure 12, that's you're going to have to try and interpret that, study with your teachers, your band directors, and see what they say. Again, I'm going to practice measure 12 as if it's an exercise in a study book. You know, so that we're mathematically lining things up, a real vertical exactness. But as I actually perform it, probably not going to be like that. I'm not going to actually stretch it. It's almost a quasi cadenza. So that we just shape it, we make it a little bit more humane. I like to think of how would a singer perform that passage work, and that's what I'm ultimately shooting for. So please feel free to send me a note, an email, if there are any questions. But I hope this helps you get a little bit of a jump start on this Rose study for the 2015 Kentucky All-State auditions. Good luck and practice hard.